And hello, everyone. I'm John OLoughlin. Welcome to McDuff Lives. And it's my great pleasure this morning to welcome back to our show Daniel Burke. Daniel Burke, a one-time candidate for Senate from the state of New Jersey and a proud member of the LaRouche and Schiller organizations, one of their prominent spokesmen, and a person who I had a pleasure of talking to, I guess, about a year ago, and get to know you some. I've then run into you at a couple of events. The Center for what is it, political innovation there with Caleb Maupin, and then before that, of course, at Rage Against the War Machine in Washington, D.C. So it's great to have you back to the show. Welcome, Daniel Burke.
Thank you so much, John, and thank you to everyone watching.
Yeah, it's great to have this connection with you and so many of the great folks that are associated with your organization. Well, what I wanted to do today was nothing less than, in the space of an hour, to solve the economic problems of the United States. And I think if anybody can do it, it would be the representatives from Lyndon LaRouche, who's been working on this project for probably 50 years. And while I've looked at many of your things, I've read lots and lots of your EIR articles, the Executive Intelligence Review, which is so helpful to getting background on these issues. I would like to just start as basic as we can with a question of, well, Daniel, if you were able to run the economic policy of the United States, you've got a magic wand, okay? And you've just been nominated by the president, and the Congress has said, okay, we're turning everything over to the LaRouche organization. And the LaRouche organization said, Daniel, step up to the plate and show us how to hit a home run with this messy problem we've got. Where would you start? With the derivatives, with the whole Federal Reserve, with the structure itself, or perhaps the petrodollar problem? So many ways that we can attack this huge issue. How about derivatives? Anyway, I open the floor to you.
Well, I have an answer that if I really want to put it in terms that are strategically relevant, if we're actually looking at the conditions that humanity is in today, take a look at Lula's visit to China and the installation of Dilma Rousseff, who had been formally removed from office by a State Department operation, essentially, now the head of the BRICS Development Bank. And what they're saying there is a new system is coming online. And so, in fact, I think that the first and most important thing that could be done for U.S. economic policy would be for a U.S. president to reach out for an emergency international financial conference to reorganize the bankrupt system. Because we're in a situation where to solve the problems of the U.S. economy requires the creation of an entirely new international economic order. And the BRICS Plus countries are moving in that direction with great confidence. Yet, it will not really function unless we have U.S. cooperation in that process. Because the problems to which you refer, for example, the derivatives, are absolutely an international crisis and do not affect one nation as a specific, in a specific way that is not in reference to the broader problem. So that's my first answer, is that basically we're going to have, in the best possible world, or in the best I think we live in the best possible world, so let me change that. If everything could go exactly how I wish it would, then, and we had the keys, then that would be the first action, to sit down in order to discuss principles that will be applied in the U.S. economy and globally, such as, of course, the most, I think that look at it from this perspective, there's no credit flowing into the U.S. economy. There's a so-called credit crunch. But really, if you look at the past several years, Paul Gallagher of Executive Intelligence Review has done a review of this. their loans are not being let out. The deposits are at a much higher level compared to the loans that are being let out than historically. And what we're going to need is a lot of credit to real productive, high energy density projects in the United States. We need to get things built. That means building up hospitals, building up high-speed trains, building up nuclear power plants, building up actually new railroads and new cities. Development corridors is, of course, the crucial concept from the LaRouche movement, that we would look across our nation, and in the same sense that George Washington saw the need for the Erie Canal, we will look and say, it is time for the economic development of the West. This means mega projects of infrastructure, and if we're going to get those, then we're going to do it with massive new amounts of public credit organized through a national bank. And in the same process that we're fighting for that, we are going to have to address the completely worthless debts in the financial system, again, from a top-down international effort. What we're calling for is a global Glass-Steagall, which basically means that we would go to the Wall Street banks and we would force them to hive themselves off into two institutions. One that deals with commercial activity, which is to say good, useful, productive loans, and one that deals in deposits, of course, and one that deals with speculative activity, including all of the derivatives. And we, like it happened in 1933 under Franklin Roosevelt, will tell those bankers, you are bankrupt, you will not be bailed out by the US government, you are being forced to write off a massive amount of the assets on your asset book because they're worthless, and we're never going to pay them. So all of this immense amount of derivatives that is piled up, we're not going to allow it any longer. We're going to eliminate it in such way that we can defend the pension funds, defend the people who are, invested in these things in legitimate ways, or who legitimate institutions that have been, brought into that. But most important is to clean out the worthless crap and get new credit flowing to the real productive projects that will increase the physical capabilities of the economy.
Well, a couple of things. The first one that leapt out at me was that you are of the opinion that we need a global a conference, a global convocation to address this problem, because it's bigger than the United States can solve, in the sense that the financial system is a worldwide system, if I understand what you're saying. And therefore, in order to solve the derivative problem, which I think most people do agree is the huge elephant in the middle of the room that we need to get rid of, that we need to have a worldwide solution. And that's kind of not an easy thing for me to accept, because I'd love to have the idea that we still have enough power as a sovereign country to solve our own problems without having to bring in, President Lula from Brazil and the BRICS and whoever else we say we need to have a solution for. So sovereignty, of course, is there's two issues that I think I personally and most of the folks that subscribe to McDuff Lives are most interested in. The first one is sovereignty, and the second one, probably even more important, is the preservation of individual freedoms, the Bill of Rights, and the individual sovereignty and liberty. So if a worldwide solution comes in, how will the United States still be able to protect the individual rights of its citizens through the Bill of Rights? Or is the Constitution itself going to have to be modified in order to accommodate the worldwide solution that might come out of such a conference?
Everything we will do will be constitutional. That's the only way we're going to save the economy, because in fact, the Hamiltonian economics are constitutional and have everything to do with the general welfare clause and with Article 1, Section 8, for example, of the U.S. Constitution. who is actually supposed to control the currency and for what purpose. So by reasserting those constitutional elements, which were elaborated by Hamilton in his 4 reports to the U.S. Congress, as requested by George Washington, we will actually have a model, the model that has been successful in the past in the United States repeatedly, for massive increase in the productivity of our economy. And it is that type of sovereign action that must be done in concert, because sovereignty is against something, in a certain sense, in this era in human history. Sovereignty is against oligarchism. We're looking at this global financial oligarchy centered in the city of London and Wall Street. They're the ones that run the US dollar, for example. Enormous percentage of the, I don't have it in front of me, but out of the dollars that are created in London as new loans that are sent out for speculative purposes. We're going to need to address that in concert with other sovereign nations. And this is what was done in 1944. And if it had been successful, then things would have gone much, much better in the 20th century. There was a conference in the United States in the Bretton Woods Conference, of course, in which nations sat down together and formed agreements on fixed exchange rate system, on a gold reserve system, and the dollar was set up as a reserve currency. So what we're proposing is something very similar, that the way to defeat financial oligarchy is through the concerted action of sovereign nation states. And I think that the philosophical, the necessary philosophical underpinning of this is something that LaRouche talked about a lot, which is quite, I think, controversial. He said that in a republic, in the sense of Plato's republic, in the sense of the intended US republic, the purpose of the republic, the distinction between a republic and an oligarchy, for example, or a democracy in another case, is that people act on the basis of reason to advance the society as a whole, and that each individual is implicitly responsible to the progress of the entire society. That's what really defines the republic. That you create conditions where an individual who may be an entrepreneur, maybe a scientist, maybe a classical artist, maybe an educator, maybe simply someone who is raising a family, is doing so with a conception that my interests coincide with the nation's interests. And when I succeed, it is because the nation succeeds. And when the nation succeeds, it is because I succeed. Well, LaRouche went even further, because I think that idea is very exciting in and of itself. But he said that implicitly, the individual and the nation is also responsible for the general welfare of the planet. And I don't mean the planet in the Gaia sense. I mean humanity. That the role of the United States is to lift up the common welfare of mankind in a system that is that acknowledges the role of other sovereign nations that represent completely distinct language cultures. There's no intention to cause other people to adopt our political system per se. It's the principle that we act towards the common aims of mankind in mutual action. And that's what a new Bretton Woods conference would be, is that we would sit down you'd have the US president sit down with Xi Jinping and Putin and the other leaders of the BRICS and other major countries. Surely India is a crucial part of that. And then they would make agreements that would say what would benefit the whole, what would benefit the other, would also be to the greatest benefit to me. Namely, the upgrading of technological capabilities, high-tech development in every region of the world. U.S. firms could be producing the high-tech capital goods that are going to be required for the industrialization of Africa, for the real high-tech industrialization of Africa. We could be building the high-speed trains. We could be building the nuclear power plants. We could be building all of these types of really challenging, high-tech, advanced manufacturing goods that the United States used to be the experts in. And now increasingly it's in Asia that's the case, in China particularly. But we could be doing that. And so the uplifting of the conditions of the world, the creation of credit vehicle like an international development bank that would actually extend long-term low-interest credit to nations in the global south, that's to the benefit of the United States. We don't cede our sovereignty. We seek cooperative agreements between sovereign nations that are entered into with, as equals.
You sound a lot like John F. Kennedy in your your hopes and aspirations for people to ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. And that spirit, was alive when Kennedy was alive, and I was alive when Kennedy was alive. And the death of that spirit, it's like that whole idea that I, as just one person, one of 200 and some million people, can make the country better. And this is one of my great themes too. I don't know if you know the great anthem called American Anthem by Gene Shear, but the lyrics to that are just perfect for me. And the idea of that battles fought together and quiet battles fought alone. These are the seeds from which America has grown. These lyrics are very much aligned with what you've been saying, and to revive that spirit of, yes, we are one nation and under God, if you will, but we are one nation. And we've got to stay that way because as you start with the Constitution, with what you said, without the Constitution, there is just nothing. And that we can parade around all we want to and say, I have, my rights come from God and you can't take them away from me. And you can say that while you're at the point of a bayonet being marched into prison. That is the dilemma that we face, is that it takes more than just faith, it takes action. And that's what I really look for from people who are on the forefront of our work here to try to restore that American spirit that you so well characterized. I don't like the idea of worldwide bodies. Just my own experience at looking at the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, and things that come out of the UN generally, from UNESCO, and all of the connections that has to the plans for world government that we can trace back, through the Nazis to the Rockefellers and as far back as you want to go. And those people that want that world government are also, in most cases, the ones that want to depopulate the planet, and it is part of their scheme to not allow the productive growth that you ask for, to not say to keep the lid on all the pots, to make sure that the pensions don't get paid. One of the great tragedies here in Maryland, as you probably know, was the Sparrows Point Bethlehem Steel Plant, which went out of business back in I think about early 70s or late 60s, and just walked away from their pension obligations. And these are the type of things that you speak of, that we're going to preserve the pension obligations. We're going to preserve the 401ks. We've got to preserve people's ideas and dreams that they're going to be able one day, if they do their part, to relax and let the next generation carry the ball for a while. Our population issues are there's a lot of that Club of Rome, and Harley Schlanger talks about it all the time. This dark side of these financial manipulators, and how do you address that problem? That there are very, very powerful forces that simply don't want Africa developed, don't want Kentucky to come out of poverty, don't want the solutions that are sitting on the table that you guys and many others around the world have been presenting for decades.
Well, let me first say to your initial point there that I'm enjoying working through the book that you gave me and very graciously signed your book on your father. And I think that he really represents, from what I've learned from your book, the spirit that you're talking about. And his battle has a lot to do with what we're talking about. And the change, the paradigm shift that has taken over the United States since the assassination of Kennedy toward this Malthusian, cynical, depraved, collapsing culture and economy, which is absolutely what we're facing here, as enforced by exactly what you're talking about, the Rockefellers, Trilateral Commission, the City of London, and many other factors in this, and of course the Federal Reserve, the whole thing. So one thing that I think that one effect of that terrible process is the feeling that it's impossible for there to be such a thing as good government or good international cooperation. I'm not necessarily, I don't think that our organization is really proposing any new international bodies, certainly nothing like a world government kind of a body, anything like that. We've always been against that completely and traced exactly the history that you refer to, including others. So what we're talking about is something I would call agreements. Think about it from the standpoint of agreements being made between sovereign governments. And the Saudi-Iran agreement is an example of something like this. It's not exactly what we're talking about, but it's the same type of thing. Two sovereign nations who have been pitted against each other for decades and decades by the oligarchy, by the empire, especially by the British. They say to themselves, well, we're going to sit down with China and we're going to solve that problem and we're going to make friends. We're going to do what Lincoln said, which is he said, I destroy my enemies by making them my friends. And that is the principle that we're talking about here, because the substance of peaceful cooperation is physical economic progress. That's the whole thing. It's a shared mission for mutual benefit, which is definable in terms of your mortality rate. It's definable in terms of your electricity consumption. Is it growing? Is it growing massively? How about your rail tonnage? Are you moving more things around in your country? Are you producing more things in your country? Then we're on the right track. Are we lifting up people, eradicating poverty, and creating the conditions for the next generation to do something wildly more exciting and beneficial? Then we're doing the right thing, right? And the LaRouche insistence is that there's no such thing as a Kantian peace, as a negative peace. There's no such thing as a peace which is the absence of war. It doesn't exist. Peace is a mutual process of shared mission, of cooperation for the common aims. So to my mind, we have to take the kind of pessimism that has been intentionally inserted into our country, and removed a lot of that Kennedy spirit. And we have to put it in context and say, you know what? That was forced on us. That was about the old paradigm. And the new paradigm is coming online. So let's get with the new paradigm and let's start thinking like the new paradigm. Let's start thinking 50 years in advance. And then the agreements that we make are not agreements about how we're going to give up our rights. That's not what we're doing. We're making agreements about how we're going to build the biggest tunnel that history has ever seen, crossing the Bering Strait. That's the agreement that I'm looking for. And that means long-term, low-interest credit needs to go out for this because it's going to take a long time to do it, not forever, but it's going to take a long time. And it means we're going to have to massively increase the number of engineers, the number of people who are qualified to work on such a project. We're going to have to design machines that have never been designed before, that are bigger than ever before. in order to bore that tunnel, and then we're going to have to upgrade the whole U.S. rail system. So it's actually, part of that network going into the Belt and Road. That's the future kind of agreement that I'm talking about. It is necessary to have some kind of an international development bank. But there, I think you have to look at, again, the kind of concept of the republic, or the principles by which decisions are made, the ideas that are behind the decisions that are made. The IMF, Helga LaRouche was making the point a couple of days ago. In the 1970s, we said the IMF was worse than Hitler because they were killing more people with conditionalities, with the so-called conditionalities, where they extend a loan, but then they say, in order for you to receive this loan, you have to cut fuel subsidies. You have to submit to the crushing of your food self-sufficiency. And you have to submit to free trade, WTO policies, and so forth. All these types of things. They massively extended poverty, and they killed enormous numbers of people through poverty. And that was in the 70s we were talking about that. It is so much worse what has happened since then. So many horrific conditions have been imposed upon people all across the world, and economic development has been choked exactly by these powerful groups that you're talking about. Yet, the global south is not going along with it. And the Ukraine war has been a big shift on that. It was pointed out in the EIR Daily the other day that out of 54 countries in Africa, not a single one went along with the U.S. imposed sanctions on Russia. 0 for 54. And there have been many, many cases like this. The South African Foreign Minister, Dr. Pandor, is one of the leading voices in Africa who is saying, she publicly said to Tony Blinken, no, we're not doing what you're asking us to do. Politely, we refuse. There is a sensibility among African leaders and in many other parts of the world, in South America and Latin America especially, that we are going to solve the problems that we were told cannot be solved. And I would look at the Yemen ceasefire as a good example of the fact that problems can be solved that seemed impossible to deal with because of how much the world has shifted in the direction of this new paradigm. So it's from that standpoint that I look at these horrible people who have such direct control over operations in the West. And I say, we have to do something about that. And I'm trying to do something about it. Last night I went to see Cory Booker, John, and Chris Christie. And yeah, we told them what we thought. So we've been doing these interventions. We stood up at a big event in Newark at Seton Hall Law School last night, me and my friend Dewey, and we said to Cory Booker, who had the gall to start talking about how religious he is, that the only thing you have to offer is hyperinflation and World War III, and we're not going to put up with it. Stop funding Ukraine. Stop these crushing sanctions, mass murdering people in Syria and Afghanistan. Stop crushing Africa. They're not putting up with it, and we should work with Russia and China for economic development of the world. Naturally I was thrown out for saying something like that. Of course you're going to be thrown out for that. But I'm encouraging people, yes, we're up against a huge problem here, but they're not all powerful. It's not, there is such a thing as the voice of the American patriot.
I was just saw a poll right before our show that said that values like patriotism in polling has gone down from like 70% to 39% or something like that. And that, that's one of the things that I've always been interested in, is because I've always been very patriotic. And I think most of the people that are American citizens are in their hearts patriotic. But the media and the Democrats and just tearing us apart as best as they can. What we need is a kind of a leadership and that's what I'm hoping to develop some develop with you and your associates at the LaRouche and Schiller organizations. You have a big conference coming up this weekend of the 15th and 16th of April to address such things. I wonder if you'd like to introduce that to the crowd, and because I think the more people we can get involved with that, the more likely we'll be able to get some people to stand up, as you have done so many times, and make an intervention of maybe not in Cory Booker's office, but in your local political system, and talk to people about these issues. I think number one, you're right that there has to be an international solution, but on that point, I think everybody's kind of waiting for the Ukraine war to resolve. And how is that going to? We have to wait until the shooting stops to try to address the international situation. And I don't think the shooting is going to stop. I think they're going to keep that war going as long as they possibly can. That's just my fear, and I think probably a lot of people see it the same way. We keep hoping that it's going to resolve. There's going to be the spring offensive, or this is going to resolve. Blah blah blah. But man, they keep killing each other right and left all day long, and it's just tragic beyond tragedy. And then the other point was about the preservation of our individual rights in that system, and that requires addressing the idea of patriotism with our local political leaders, and to say, what's wrong with patriotism? What's wrong with and especially in the context that we talk about with people like Lincoln, who recognize that we are the last best hope on earth for mankind, and for mankind to exist other than in a system of elites and slaves. We've got to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. So the leadership that you guys offer, I want folks to take advantage of it. So let's talk a little bit more specifically about how to make a change in the United States. The interventions are fantastic, but other than that, what is the big pitch that I could make? I have to tell you, I live in a district, in the congressional district of Representative Steny Hoyer, and Steny Hoyer is one of the deep insiders. He has been very good to us in Southern Maryland, in that we have got Navy bases and Army bases and all the kind of bases you can imagine, probably secret bases that I don't even know about, all over the Chesapeake Bay, all over the Potomac River, and the Virginia side with Fort Belvoir and all the Marine barracks and everything else, the Marine Quantico. This area is besotted with money from military applications, but as far as the rest of the economy, if it all dried up, Daniel, we'd be back to growing. Well, we can't even grow tobacco anymore.
Oh gosh.
I don't want you to get the impression that we're all a bunch of hicks down here. The problem is that there's no. There's not.
No, I understand completely. Yeah.
No, you understand what I'm saying. That I would love to see, and that really, to me, food policy has got to be part of this.
Absolutely.
And local food policy. And one thing we do have down here is we've got some great sunshine. The land was burned up with the tobacco farming and the early settlement and all, but there's plenty of ways there's actually some really nice fertile ground around here too. I'm going to try to get to self-sufficiency with gardening, starting out this year. Hopefully in the next 2 or 3 years I'll get there. But food policy, how does this fit into the solution?
Well, we need to double world food production. That is our position, and we need about 1 million new family farms in the United States. Which means crush the cartels, Cargill, Monsanto, the huge meat packing transnationals. Cut them up. Take that factor out. It is absolutely crucial. And then we have got to get loans out to people, families, such that they can develop land and actually improve it and create conditions for the massive improvement of agriculture. And we've got to be doing at the same time the huge water projects like the famous NOAPA project, North American Water and Power Alliance, to bring water down from the Yukon River all the way down to the Rio Grande. These are things, when I started working with the LaRouche movement 10 years ago, that felt like just such a wonderful, exciting thing, but also so far away. And now, it's still not like around the corner, but these kinds of projects are happening all around the world. The idea that it's somehow a strange thought that the US could get mega projects going again is ridiculous, because what's going on are conversations among heads of state about building such things. And then certain nations have taken the lead in doing that, obviously, especially China. So we could be doing this kind of thing, and we could take control back from these hideous transnational cartels, which are choking the food supply, massively degrading its quality, giving the American people the most horrible diet, and all the other things that we all know. So my advertisement for you then, or to begin to talk about the conference, is that my good friend Bob Baker will be speaking, and he is absolutely wonderful. He is a farmer. His family is a farming family. He does things in agriculture. He doesn't tend to farm farm actively right now, but he is involved in farms and farming in his professional work. And he is a top LaRouche organizer, talking to people at the Kansas Cattlemen's Association and the National Farm Union and many other organizations like this. In fact, he recently went to the Netherlands and spoke at the big farmers' protest that was taking place there about a month ago, I think. And he was in front of a huge number of people who had come out, many with their tractors, to oppose the green Malthusian policy of eliminating agriculture, of destroying food and food capability. He will be speaking on the third panel of this conference, which is going to be on Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern at schillerinstitute.com, and you can register for the conference at schillerinstitute.com. I really encourage you to do so. That way you'll receive reminder emails, and you'll receive emails about future events and other material that you can forward to people that you'd like to invite to participate in this. Because we want people to come in for a dialogue on subjects that we've been talking about today, that John is bringing up. And who is Bob going to be talking about, representing this concept of the international farmers movement? What is he going to be talking about? Who is he going to be talking with? On panel 3, the title is End the Casino Economy Before It's Too Late. And the specific part of this organization, of this panel, is that we have got to mobilize the farmers, and a manifesto of farmers from around the world is in preparation. A sort of a statement of what the farmers, what the food producers are demanding. He's going to be talking with a sitting congressman from Mexico, Congressman Benjamin Robles. He's going to be speaking with Julio Devido, who's the former Minister of Economics and Public Works and a former congressman in Argentina. He's going to be speaking with a Brazilian journalist, Marcos de Oliveri, Pedro Paez from Ecuador, who's the former Minister for Economic Policy of that nation, and Mr. Seni from the Congo, who is a Secretary General of the Pan-African League, Dr. Mohamed Tour, who is the chairman of the board of the Pakistan American Congress, and my young friend Simon Miller of the LaRouche Youth Movement. He's 19 years old, and he's going to be giving a presentation on that panel. So imagine all of those people, leading former ministers, economic ministers, people involved in defining economic policy for major nations, sitting down with an Iowa farm boy of the LaRouche movement to talk about how to double food production and save humanity from this crisis.
Apropos, if you don't mind, I'm just going to put up one of our comments from the chat room. Route 3, Box 6 from Texas, and he's somebody that's very skeptical about some of the things that we talk about here on the show. So I wanted to give him his voice here and let you respond. He says, "Send me the money, baby. With unlimited water, I'll make the desert bloom. Without chemicals, herbicides, I'll need unlimited cheap labor for weeding." Well, there's a couple of interesting issues, isn't it?
I agree. I think the water will make the desert bloom. That's true. We're going to do that. It's happening, and it's going to happen on a much broader scale across the world, and it's going to create the conditions for a great increase in agriculture. Yes, we need to train new farmers. We also need to double the number of engineers in the United States. We need to double the number of scientists, and not just in our country, but in all countries. Doctors, we need more. Um, and as for the chemical herbicides, of course, I am of the view that the Malthusian effort to eliminate chemical herbicides and pesticides is just that. It's a policy of reducing agricultural output. And just look at Sri Lanka for an example of how that turns out. So I'm absolutely in favor of using the power of science to improve agriculture. But once again, it has to be done from the standpoint of what's actually good for people and what's healthy for people, and not from the standpoint of what's good for transnational cartels.
And that is a perfect example of exactly the problem we have, because the transnational cartels have control of our food policy, and they're using chemical means against our best interests, and in order to maximize profit and to create those easy to grow GMO organized organisms that we've talked about many times on the show, that really are not there to improve our health or increase our ability to do things in our lives. And instead, they're there just to create this monocrop. And the worst part of it is the elimination of natural farm. Now that's where the two issues come together, and I think you put them together very well. That we need to use science in a positive way, in a healthy way, and yeah, I'm sure there's a way that science and good husband and good farming techniques can avoid putting poisons in our foods. So work together with that in mind, and I think we can accomplish that. You talked about engineering, and we're absolutely not educating engineers for American purposes. I had dinner, my wife and I had dinner with a couple about 2 months ago, in which he was an engineer on a project to examine the sun's corona with specific instruments. And he's a physicist, an astrophysicist, and he's really in a very, very specific field of science. He comes from Sri Lanka, and he talked about how people come from other countries all around the world to the United States. They learn the United States' highest technologies, but then they don't stay. Then they go back to the home countries, and those technologies become useful, for instance, in China or in some other country. And those, it's not the technology that's important, it's the brains. It's the humans that have learned to use the technology that can create the next leap in science. And once they've gotten their degrees from the US and they've got the basic, and usually it has commercial applications, then they're gone, and the commercial applications and the profits are not retained here in the United States. I'm just saying that there seems to be a system in our education, in our grant system, that drives that type of activity and takes away the promise of increasing our productive economy, as you say.
Well, it's my view that the failure is the failure to have a scientific driver mission for the economy. I've spoken to my good friend Richard Black, who I think you may have spoken with before. He went to Bronx Science and Technology High School, prominent magnet school in New York City. And that was back in the 60s that he was there. So it was in the midst of this incredible excitement about Kennedy's space program and the moonshot. And there was a huge effort to bring in NASA scientists and talk to the kids about becoming engineers, becoming scientists, about working on these types of things. Then the whole concept is that the US government commitment means that there is public credit flowing in the direction of this new technology, breakthroughs in science in fundamental ways, that therefore a huge amount of private credit is motivated to start flowing, because they know, oh, if the government is working on this, then I can commit my resources as an entrepreneur. My firm can commit its resources in the same direction, and it's going to pay off. And so that's how you had this remarkable thing, which we often refer to, which is that Chase Econometrics did a study of the investment into the Apollo program and discovered that for every dollar that was invested, you got back 10 or 11. And not only 10 or $11, but you actually got back 10 or $11 in a new world where you can go to space when you couldn't do that before, right? So you create completely new dimensions of activity, and it creates prosperity. So what such a science driver mission does, where you pick an extremely difficult, remember the words of Kennedy, we're going to organize the best of our capabilities with this mission, the best of our abilities. So you choose something that is so difficult, it seems impossible, and it would require you to massively upgrade your citizenry. And that's how you're going to get these worthless universities in the United States to get in line. I mean, in general, in the sense that they're not contributing to the national mission. Get them in line, get them to contribute to the national mission, and young Americans who are right now in rural parts of the United States languishing in a deindustrialized, collapse, we're going to pull them out of that. We're going to give them the education that they need. They're going to contribute to a national mission. And in the same process, they're going to be participating in the reindustrialization of the continent, of our continental nation. So that's sort of the perspective that I have.
You have to be able, though, Daniel, to step back like 100 years or so and put all this stuff in context, because, yeah, those type of wonderful intentions have existed for a long time. And as we've emphasized, they've been kind of squashed under by the media and the powers that be. But the powers that be are still the powers that be. And one of the things that they did in that 100 years is to take over the boards of trustees and the boards of governors of all of these great institutions. The Ivy League, the California, UC Davis, where Professor Hamamoto was, and so many of our Stanford, all of these places, they're not working toward the best interests of this productive economy in the United States. They're working toward the best interests of their sponsors, the corporations, the Ford Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation, the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, all of these deeply corrupt institutions, if I may say so, are still running our colleges. And it's getting worse and worse as you see more and more reports of young students that appear to just be brainwashed with this crazy ideology of the modern, I don't even know how to characterize it, but you know what I mean.
I know exactly what you mean. It's terrifying. And as a parent of young children, it's very scary, because the most insane ideologies are being instructed at the, at kindergarten and first grade, at the demand of the state. It's really scary. So what are we going to do about it? Well, first of all, do something about it. You know what I mean? Like, you got to get off your butt and do something. I'm speaking to the audience, of course, and organize people in the way that John does, in the way that we do, in the way that you will, in the particular way that you're going to do it, because it's only you who's going to do what you're going to do. And what I'm proposing is that basically it be brought into understanding here that there is a powerful role of the LaRouche movement, which is founded by, I think, the greatest American patriot. I mean, let me rephrase that. He belongs in the top tier. I'll put it like that. Okay, he belongs in the top tier. Lyndon LaRouche, and great genius. He's in the same. He's in presence of people like Alexander Hamilton and George Washington. He's done everything he can to live up to their standard and to continue their mission. And now we're in the position where we can continue LaRouche's mission because, of course, he's no longer with us since 2019. But the potential is pretty clear. Helga LaRouche, LaRouche's widow, she's organizing this conference this weekend, and she has got a thing or two up her sleeve. She pulled together the head of the Russian Foreign Affairs University, the famous MGIMO, which, by the way, they teach more languages there than any other institution in the entire world. 56 languages, different languages you can learn at that university. It's the university that trained Lavrov, that trained Zakharova, and so forth, these preeminent diplomats. And one of the acting dean of that institution is going to be joining the conversation in the first panel on Saturday morning at 9 at schillerinstitute.com. There's also going to be a lecturer at the Indonesian Foreign Affairs University. So we're going to have two of the biggest, most important countries strategically are going to be, their foreign affairs capability at the highest level is going to be represented at the highest level other than government, will be represented at this conference. And we're laying out the principles of a new future. And by the way, that's what Sergei Lavrov said recently. He said, I actually have it written down somewhere. He said that the ceasefire discussion, an end to the war, that discussion should be about the principles that a new world order will be based on. An order, and people have to avoid choking on that phrase because just take it literally. This is not George H.W. Bush saying that. The order which we all need instead of the unipolar world order overseen by one hegemon. Alongside the overwhelming majority of other states, Russia stands for that new organization of nations. So he's saying, if we're going to get peace, if we're going to solve any of these problems, we have to have a new system, a new international security and development architecture. That's the purpose of the first panel. That's the discussion. And Helga LaRouche has a set of 10 principles she's defined, which she thinks are absolutely crucial to such a thing being successful. And they are absolutely 100% coherent with the U.S. Constitution. She'll also be joined by Scott Ritter, as well as Ambassador Chaz Freeman, who was the translator for Nixon in his trip to China. He's the former ambassador to Saudi Arabia, so he knows a lot about what's happening there between Saudi Arabia and Iran.
Wow. When's he going to be on? Do you have that in front of you?
That will be 9 a.m. on Saturday. I don't know exactly at what point. He comes after the first brief Q&A session, so probably around 10.
I am so fascinated to hear that because I've just been myself focusing on the Nixon and the Kissinger, Zhu Enlai meetings, and terrific. I'm sure you've dived into it yourself, but when you read things that are even just transcripts of Zhu Enlai speaking in English, you become impressed how deeply educated, deeply wise man was Zhu Enlai, and a tragic loss that he's gone. But those conversations with Kissinger, and Kissinger then reporting those conversations to Nixon after the fact, are the opening of China. And that is the beginning of this incredible Chinese resuscitation, or however you want to put it. But wow, if you look at pictures of China now and you think, wow, how in the world did they build those big buildings and those incredible trains? It's they are justly proud of their national progress. And The idea that we would have to control every iota of a Chinese person's life seems silly. The idea that a Chinese person could reach into my life and make me do this or that because of some regulation passed at the UN is still one of my big uh, themes, not about China, or I'm just talking about just
Sure.
having an international body reach down inside of the sovereign United States and direct me as to how I can live my life. I think that is the concern of a lot
Hmm.
of the more people that consider themselves patriotic in the country. So it's not a loss of sovereignty. It is just a re-examination of the principles that you have stated that are the Kennedy, the good American, what I like to think of as the restoration that comes at the end of the Macbeth play, where Macduff comes in and tries to set things back in order, restore the legitimate government. Our government has been subverted. Our government has been taken over by these forces, and it's through education and through movements like yours, Daniel, that we can get it back again. Um, Final thoughts from you.
I am just really grateful to you for hosting this show and for having these discussions with people and for your support and collaboration with the LaRouche movement. I invite everyone. You know, things have changed a lot. Things have changed a lot, like in the past year or two. Um, there is a. It's possible to have conversations with people that you would have thought were impossible. Things have now become so open that you can begin to talk to people out, on your grocery store trip about de-dollarization. You can talk to them about, about what's happening in this insanity in the United States with things like, the Trump arrest and so forth. And what we should be really trying to communicate with the people that we're with is that there is an option. There is an alternative. The problems that exist in the West are man-made, and therefore they can be solved by man. And my experience has been that the kind of international conferences that the Schiller Institute organizes are just an absolutely crucial, really powerful way to bring people together and conceive of a better future and what steps we can take to make it happen. So I invite you to participate in that conference, schillerinstitute.com. It's April 15 and 16. And I only talked about two of the panels. There are two more panels with tremendous speakers, including significant organizations in the United States and internationally, like Pax Christi, the People's Party, and various other individuals. So the former president of Guyana. So I invite all of you to enjoy that and to stay in touch and to keep collaborating.
All right, Daniel Burke of the LaRouche Organization and the Schiller Institute. Very grateful for your time this morning, and hope everybody takes advantage of the offer to participate Saturday, the 15th and 16th of April at the schillerinstitute.com. You can find the link right there. And we will I'll be with you tomorrow for a live chat at 11. Hope to see you then. Have a great afternoon. Bye for now. Wait a minute.